all the little pea brains out there are going to say, oh, yes, that's exactly right. And yes, the elections worked just fine. See, because Trump won, so everything else must be fine. And a lot of people are just going to drop off, and they're going to continue this charade of election denialism. But sadly, some people aren't going to come off, and I'm not stopping until we fix this. And I know there's a small group of us that are going to keep pushing through all this. So hopefully people pull their heads out of their behinds and realize this is our one opportunity that God has given us to fix our election system. And if we do not fix it right now in this 4-year period, then this is all going to be short-lived, and we're going to be right where we were prior to this. This is another opportunity God has given us. We absolutely cannot waste it.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
We're so pleased to have our friend Mark Cook joining us again. For those of you who know Mark, you know he's a patriot and a tireless warrior for election integrity and the truth. And we're going to talk to him about the after-action report on the election today. Before we talk to him, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Psalm chapter 18, verses 35 through 37. And it says, "You empower me for victory with your wraparound presence. Your power makes me strong to subdue, and by stooping down in gentleness, you've strengthened me and made me great. You've set me free from captivity, and now I'm standing complete, ready to fight some more. I've caught up with my enemies and conquered them, and I didn't turn back until the war was won." And this scripture gives us a window into King David's heart, and it's wise counsel for us today. You know, the farther we get from 2020, the more clear it becomes to me that we, the people, needed a serious and even painful wake-up call. And I'm convinced that if the election wasn't stolen in 2020, or it wasn't stolen and happened the way that it did with, still no seeming resolution, we would not be sitting here today recognizing that the Trump win is just the beginning of the fight. It's just the open door to begin the fight that's necessary to restore the nation and the people back to the foundational principles of truth, justice, liberty, and extremely limited government. And this victory for the election is absolutely one to be celebrated, and God deserves all the glory because every winning strategy comes from him. But we can't rest. We cannot stop here. We cannot stop until the war is won. And when it is, we have to stand very vigilant and guard over all that's been reestablished and taken back. There's no room for sitting on the couch.
Absolutely not. As you suggested, Danielle, we have to be standing and ready to fight again. I'm sure some people have taken a little bit of a break here, maybe gotten some rest, but I'm not entirely convinced that our guest today ever takes a break. I think Mark Cook I think he has Trump-like energy, and really few people have done more to raise public awareness, not just in Colorado, but nationally, about the serious flaws in our election system. So it's such a pleasure to have you with us again today, Mark. How are you? Have you been getting any sleep?
I think I got about 4 or 5 hours, maybe 4. I'm up at Searcy County, Arkansas right now, actually parked in their parking lot outside the Civic Center where we just did the hand count of the 2024 general election.
Wow. And then it's off to where from there?
Try to get back to Colorado. There's a snowstorm there, and I have a feeling I'm going to have a bunch of frozen and burst pipes to deal with.
No, I pray that's not the case. I pray it's not the case.
Yeah, I do too. Well, we've had a few, I pray too. We've had a few burst pipes that went in our favor, it looks like, in this election. You've been fighting tirelessly, as we said. How do you feel overall, Mark, about the election, presidential election?
This is the most likely scenario I expected, and we are going to be in a heck of a fight trying to deal with all this fraud.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, I'm sure you're talking about the fraud that we're talking in Colorado with Gina Griswold, the quote unquote inadvertent leaking of the passwords, talking about fraud in Michigan, fraud all over the place. What specifically comes to mind? What are the top items of fraud that you've observed and seen and witnessed?
All the down ballots that are being stolen. So the most likely scenario was allowing Trump to win because they knew it would be far too obvious. And the thing that that's their most prized possession is the election illusion system that they've built. And if they took it from Trump, it would all be over because everyone would know that the whole system was totally rigged. Even the people that don't believe it, they would suddenly realize it. And that illusion system is critical to their maintenance of power and control. So they were going to let Trump win as they did and steal all the down ballots because everyone's focused only on the presidential. And they know it's easy to distract the masses. Meanwhile, they steal the critical down ballot races so they can then in turn continue their push and manipulation of the entire system, neuter Trump and everyone that's trying to clean this thing up. So that's the big fight we have now, where a lot of people are sitting there celebrating. Well, we won a little battle, but we have a much bigger one staring at us in the face. And so I'm seeing all these people thinking we just hit a home run here. We certainly did not. This is all planned, and we got to protect all those down ballots. I mean, look at Kerry Lakes. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. I know other candidates that were completely taken. Massive fraud. Colorado has
Mike
got
Rogers.
incredible fraud all over. I mean, look at Denver and Boulder compared to the rest of the counties. It's not even close. And so in their desperation, they were very sloppy. They get ton of stuff going on in Michigan, all over the place. So we all need to be focusing on all this down ballot fraud just as hard as we have fought in the past 4 years. We cannot let up. It's absolutely critical. So we had a big fight on our hands. In fact, the fight just started yesterday and will continue until January 20th, that fight. And then we're going to have a different fight after January 20th.
Yeah. And Mark, have you seen this chart? I don't know if it's big enough. That's as big as I can get it. It's the chart that shows what the election vote totals were in 2012, 2016, 2020, and 2024. And I think this chart is part of the reason that the good guys, this is my view, the good guys allowed 2020 to be so blatantly and absolutely mercilessly stolen so that we could have this chart today to show us in no uncertain terms that obviously Biden did not get 81 million lawful votes. What's your take on this?
I don't know what the cause of it was. I don't think that what we went through in the past 4 years was good for a lot of people. I think a lot of people got very hurt. And there are people that knew exactly what was being done to steal elections for a lot of years. So putting everyone through 2020 on purpose, I think would be insane. I think it's more incompetence and lack of focus and strategy. I know everyone would like to think it was on purpose. I just don't, based on everything I've seen. We're still going to have it. And actually, here's where the proof will be. The proof will be in how the down ballots are handled. If everyone, we'll say the core people, knew about election fraud and they knew it was going on and they purposely lost 2020 to show the rest of the country, then it should be very easy for them to clean up all this down ballot fraud right now, because there'd be no reason to let it happen. What? Because we already know they showed us in 2020. I know there's fraud. So what's going to happen here is you're going to see a big fight because they're going to need to fight because they really don't have a handle on it like everyone wants to think they do. And so,
well, it's a great point.
I think they do that. I think that that rumor got started, one, because some people just want to think that it was on purpose so they don't have to come to terms with the alternative, which is mass incompetence.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see that right now in how this down ballot is handled. We'll see who's in the fight still. And I have a
Yeah.
feeling the people that are going to be in the fight on the down ballot are the people that have been in the fight for the past 4 years. And the others, I have a feeling, are going to play what they've played through 2020 through 2024. That's just
I
that's the
think you're
cold
right.
hard of what I think is going to happen here.
And Mark, we have some concerns of our own on the down ballot here in Louisiana as well, which should not surprise you. Was specifically a congressional race that would flip our representation from 6 Republicans to 1 Democrat in Congress to 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats in Congress. Chris's wife, Katie, reached out to Clay Parikh to see what we could do to help uncover the fraud. And he said, well, since we don't have auditable elections here, we have no paper. He suggested that we get system logs from the Cause for America. Can you explain what system logs are and how they might help us uncover fraud?
Okay, well, because of America, and I don't know if Cause of America would have system logs, but the system logs are internal in the voting machines that should record what the voting machine does or what people do with the voting machine. Although it's a log of activities within the machine itself. Now, the problem with the architecture of our voting systems is there is no independent third-party logging mechanism. So the logging mechanisms in these systems are actually internal to the system itself. And so it's like, someone auditing themselves. And you can't trust if, that organization, that agency is, let's say investigating itself, it's very easy for them to fudge records. So these logs, it's trivial for a bad actor with the right type of knowledge could just make sure that the very important entries in the logs that we would need in order to determine what happened aren't there. All that data could be easily changed because it's stored inside the very machine that would be manipulated in the first place. So what we used to have back in the day is the logging mechanism on the mechanical and electronic voting machines was permanent logs. So it would print out the logs on paper. So as things would happen,
Okay.
you have a printer, like remember those old dot matrix printers? They would
Yeah.
print out a log line. So there's no way the software itself could even go in and change what's on the paper because it's already printed. And that's a
Right.
kind of a external logging mechanism. It's one that can't be changed by software after it's done. It's a physical logging mechanism. It's external to the system itself. But now what they do is they store it inside the same software on the same hard drive, or the same flash storage media. So the software easily can make it look like whatever it wants. It's a perfect illusion system. So, system logs are only helpful depending on the level of sophistication of the bad actor that performed the manipulation. If the manipulation was done by, let's say, the county or someone external to the voting system vendor or access into the voting system itself, then you might be lucky enough to catch something in a log. And that's why we have been fairly lucky doing that. But we haven't got to the bottom of, cold hard evidence within the machine of, let's say remote connectivity. We've seen symptoms of modifications that have occurred that must have been either remote or something that was embedded in the software that caused it. But the smoking gun of exactly what is the trigger inside the software itself is pretty much impossible to find if the bad actor is someone that has intensive knowledge of the internals of the system. So that's why we have to get rid of electronic systems. They're impossible to audit. There's no way you can effectively audit them against all possible abuses. You can only audit them against some abuses.
The logs are different than the cast vote record?
Yeah,
Or
look
is it
on
the
your own
same?
computer. You have logs. If you have a Windows machine, click on your start button and type in Event Viewer, and that'll pop up a program where you can take a look at a multitude of different event log mechanisms within your computer, and you can see all kinds of things about what your computer is doing in the background. That's the kind of stuff when you, for instance, forensically investigate a system, it would look at those logs to determine if there's symptoms of some type of abuse in it. Totally separate of cast vote records. Cast vote records are the list of votes that are tallied for each ballot. And that's something that's also stored by the voting system in that same computer. And of course, cast vote records, there's no integrity mechanism on them. So if someone wanted to modify the cast vote record before anyone actually saw it, it would be trivial to do that as well, because the cast vote records the whole system should have been designed so there was an external storage, a third-party storage of that data, and not inside the very system itself. So it really, I could design a much safer electronic voting system, but most people, 99.999% of people, would never understand and know how to read source code. Even if you put it all out there, there's no way an average citizen would be able to make sure someone didn't hide something in the source code. So they would still be dependent. They'd still have to just blindly trust other people. And we cannot have an election system that is built on blind trust. We have to have one that is so simple and transparent that everyone can see every part of it, understand how every part of it works, and be able to verify every part of it. So that's why we have no choice. We have to go back to a full paper hand count system, vote in the precinct in person, but we also need to combine that with paper-based voter registration, in-person voter registration at the counties. If you don't have that, then the same way they're manipulating elections now, they're still going to be able to do, because most of it's being done in the voter rolls and the electronic poll books.
Yeah.
Fix all this. I know exactly what we need to do this.
The theory, which I think is a correct one, is that if they had stolen the election from President Trump, it would have exploded their entire ruse. And so they allowed Trump to win, and yet they went and screwed everybody down ballot. How did that occur specifically? I'm just going to use Kari Lake as a representative example in Arizona, because she's known nationally and she's a prominent figure. How, for our listeners, how did they steal, or in the process of stealing this election from Kari Lake in Arizona, the fraud? How did it occur specifically?
Well, we'll have to get to the bottom of that. Most likely it occurred exactly the same way they've been doing it for years. The only thing they didn't pull this time in 24 is stopping counting in the middle of the night and dumping ballots and then restarting counting, because they knew if they pulled that last one again, it'd be over. So they just did all their normal cheating like they usually do. And the only reason Trump won is just because, too big to rig. It was so overwhelming. The number of votes were so overwhelming for Trump across the country that even with all their cheating, they weren't able to pull enough out. And then they couldn't go to Plan Z, which is stop the counting across the country. And they did pull that in 2020, obviously. We all saw that. There's just no way. They didn't have the balls to do it this time, because that would have been immediate game over. And so their most strategic approach is what they've done here, which is to allow the Trump win without going Plan Z, and then they can use that to say, see, there's no problem with the election system. It worked exactly as it was supposed to. It's safe and secure, and that's why you saw all the narrative conditioning that they have put out over the past couple of weeks to kind of set the stage for that. And now they're going to say, well, all these election deniers are crazy because Trump never would have won if there was election fraud. And all the little pea brains out there are going to say, oh, yes, that's exactly right. And yes, the elections worked just fine. See, because Trump won, so everything else must be fine. And a lot of people are just going to drop off, and they're going to continue this charade of, election denialism. But sadly, some people aren't going off. And I'm not stopping until we fix this. And I know there's a small group of us that are going to keep pushing through all this. So hopefully people pull their heads out of their behinds and realize this is our one opportunity that God has given us to fix our election system. And if we do not fix it right now in this 4-year period, then this is all going to be short-lived, and we're going to be right where we were prior to this. This is another opportunity God has given us. We absolutely cannot waste it.
Yeah.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the state of freedom by shopping the Flynn Movie Store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn Movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series.
Mark, are there any surprising bright spots that you've seen in the aftermath of the election?
Yeah, we got our foot in the door. We got the door was cracked open. We got a foot in there. We've got amazing people in that group. I'm so excited to see Elon and Tulsi, fantastic, RFK Jr. We got some really core people that very much care about America, care about restoring our republic, and that is fantastic. But we have to be there. The people have to be there. That's what was missing in 2016. We all were very excited with the win, and we figured, okay, great, Trump's going to fix it all. But the swamp was far deeper than even Trump realized. And that swamp has tried to destroy that man and everyone around him nonstop from the moment that he took office. In fact, they actually started from the moment he came down those escalator stairs because they knew that there was a potential there. And that's why they started this. So the bright lighting here is we have our foot in the door. This is our opportunity. We were given an opportunity to stay in the fight, and we have to take it. So I'm glad we got it. Thank you, God, for allowing. Thank all the prayer warriors out there. Played a massive part. All the people that have lost and sacrificed so much in this fight. God expected us to do the work to be able to achieve this. And maybe they did try Plan Z, and maybe Plan Z was foiled. That's possible as well. Either way, here we are, and this is our one opportunity we have. So I'm not stopping. My whole life, I spent nearly 50 years building, is totally destroyed, and I don't have anything really to go back to. Not to mention, I couldn't just go back at this point and leave this not finished. So my Hand Count Roadshow, this is day 2 of the second coming of the Hand Count Roadshow, and I got to figure out a way to fund it and be able to get around the country. But I cannot stop this right now to continue and have to fight now and do everything I can to help save all the candidates, the wonderful candidates that are having their races being stolen from them right now. We have a small opportunity to figure this out. We have to make sure people do not certify fraudulent elections, and we need to get to the bottom of it, fully audit it, and make sure that the rightful winner of these races is allowed forward.
One of the things, Mark, that we have going for us, which is very, very good, is that, Elon Musk has been very clear about the vulnerabilities of electronic voting and has repeatedly talked about the importance of paper ballots. Donald Trump has. Tucker Carlson recently said that it's absolutely insane that we still have electronic voting in the country. So I think the sentiment is growing in our favor to get rid of these machines, in significant part because of your work and your efforts. And so I think that I'm very positive about the possibility that we're moving in the right direction.
We have to, but now's the time. If we fought hard before, we are going to have to fight harder now, because what they're going to do is everything possible to protect their baby, their election illusion system, because they lose all their control mechanisms if they lose that. If we go back to hand count, their entire game is totally over. Everything's over. So we have no choice if we want to survive as a nation.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was just thinking as you were both talking about this needed move to hand count, it's not enough to just move to hand counted. Like, some of these institutions, some of these roles have been so co-opted that we have to also remove those people. I think,
Absolutely.
Getting Carrie Lake, getting her into her role, getting Mike Rogers into his role, getting these people whose elections have been stolen into their rightful roles is an absolutely critical part of this. We can't just say, okay, well, we're we're going to go forward and just fix it. We'll just build the system so that the next election will be paper ballots. We have to see a real reckoning for this cycle.
We need full spectrum assault on all of these abuse vectors in the system, even the political system, the dirty money, the child sex trafficking, all of the above. Now is our time. I guess if I was in the position, I would tell America, charge right now.
Yeah.
Warriors, charge forward now.
Yeah. We have a window of opportunity here that has got to be seized. There's no question about that. I want to ask you, Mark, about this debacle in Colorado that occurred just a few days before the election, where Gina Griswold apparently, quote unquote, inadvertently leaked the system passwords, the Dominion system passwords. Talk about that, how that was allowed to occur. Was that intentional? Was it truly inadvertent? And what does that tell you about, the vulnerabilities of these systems?
Well, my gut feeling tells me that it was not intentional, just yet another incredible lack of stupidity and maladministration and for the integrity of the system. Just blatant disregard. The passwords, the BIOS passwords, let me explain what a BIOS is. BIOS stands for Basic Input Output System, and it is think of it as a small operating system that runs when you first turn a computer on. And it's a little piece of software that runs that actually connects the physical devices on the computer, like the mouse, the keyboard, the USB ports, the serial ports, a printer, parallel port is the old school style, the modems, Wi-Fi cards, it handles the date and time. It sets all those up. It determines what all these components are connected or available on the computer. And there's also a place in the BIOS where you can turn those on and off. So you can disable, let's say, a wireless card, disable a modem, and disable USB ports. So it's a way to provide some additional, somewhat higher level of security to disable some of those physical devices to be able to secure a system. And then there's a password that you can apply to that would be required for anyone to go into that system to be able to re-enable it. So I'll give you an example. You might go into the BIOS if you're trying to secure a system and disable a wireless card and disable the USB port so someone can't plug something into it. And then you'll set a password on the BIOS. So if someone wanted to use that USB port or use that wireless card or modem, they would have to go into the BIOS with the BIOS password to then re-enable that. It's like a master key. And then the BIOS, after it figures out what's allowed to be connected and what's not, it then passes everything on to the operating system to load up. So that would be like Windows or Mac OS X that would then load up. And, even your cell phone has a BIOS equivalent and whatnot as well. So the BIOS passwords are something that only the county should have because, in my opinion, the county owns the equipment. So they should be able to secure their own equipment. But the tyrant, Jenna Griswold, in the Secretary of State's office in Colorado, wants to have all that security themselves. They want to centralize all of it. So what these absolute morons did is they kept everyone's BIOS passwords, all the county BIOS passwords, and they kept them all in a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet on their computer system. And then one of the idiots uploaded that Excel spreadsheet to their website because they were trying to give everyone the equipment list for all the counties. But in that equipment list spreadsheet is actually where they also kept the BIOS passwords. They kept, one really important thing critical to the security of the system right next to all their list of equipment because they're sloppy and they're morons. And that's why we can't have stupid people in, any official positions. But when you have an election system that is so easy to rig, what happens is the people that are behind the subtle rigging make sure they put incompetent people in these office positions or people that are on their side and very skilled at putting on an illusion of being a good candidate, but actually doing the bidding of someone else. But most of the time, they're putting morons in these positions So if you have a dumb person in a position like that, it's easy to lie to a person that's dumb. And so they put someone like Jenna
Yeah.
Griswold in there, and then Jenna blindly believes, oh, the guys at CISA and all these organizations, they've tested these systems and they certified them, so they must be good. And she doesn't have enough brain cells up here to even think, oh, maybe I should hire a separate, an external expert to take a look at this and actually evaluate this to make sure that someone up above isn't lying to me or they missed something. But no, she just blindly believes those above her. And we've got into this situation here. And she may even know that it's abusable. I think at this point, she's got to know. I mean, she knows she's not making any of these decisions herself. She's been told what to do. She knows she's a puppet. So I doubt she thinks she's really in control, knowing that she takes orders from everyone else. I mean, she's not a mastermind by any means. She's probably one of the most low IQ secretaries of state that I have ever come across, in fact. And so what they did is they put these
comes
yeah. They put the spreadsheet
she comes
on
across
there.
that way, Mark.
Crazy. Mark, Colorado was one of the earliest states called for Kamala. Do you think Colorado's really blue?
No, not at all. Colorado is, I'm born and raised there, so I know Colorado was deep red a long time ago. The blue is an illusion. The blue's an illusion. So what they did, and that's why they got her, in Denver. That's why Dominion's headquartered, guess where? In Denver. And so what they've done is they've gradually started turning the results bluer over the years. And they couldn't just flip them all to blue. You can't go from deep red to deep blue all of a sudden. People, even the most clueless of people, think, wait a minute, how did that happen? So what you have to do is you got to, when you cook that frog, you got to do it 1 degree at a time. And that's what they've done. They've really pushed out a lot of just overly liberal things in Denver and Boulder. And they pushed that out to condition the public to think those are very, very liberal cities. And then as they were doing that and conditioning the public, they started flipping the results hard through myriad of different types of manipulations, but mostly voter rolls and mail-in ballots. That's the easiest way for them to do it. So 20 years ago, when mail-in ballots showed up, that's when all that really took off. And they started doing it pretty hardcore. So they shifted to purple and then, light blue. And now, according to on paper, the results of the elections, it looks deep blue. In fact, so deep blue that apparently 79.1% is the number that I saw at about 65% votes cast. 79% voted for Kamala. You believe that?
That's psycho.
79
No, I don't believe it.
of the public. There is absolutely no chance, even with the illusion that whole race was, that entire campaign of theirs was a total illusion, all fabricated. I would have expected maybe they could get people to buy a 50-50, but they had to keep the momentum of how, quote unquote, liberal Denver and Boulder are. Denver and Boulder, by the way, Denver was 79.1% when I last checked. Boulder was 79.0%. They almost tracked exactly these two cities.
Wow.
And then if you look at the city right next to them, like, or a county right next to them within 10 feet, the ratio is, maybe 50-50. Or it could be, a 35, 65. It's totally night and day, 10 feet away. And that's how when there's just egregious manipulation in the system. So I haven't seen the results this morning there. I'm sure it's absolutely pathetic. I'll pull it up while we're talking here.
Yeah, and y'all had some important ballot initiatives as well. Same-sex marriage and abortion as a constitutional right, I believe, that all passed. And it just doesn't pass the sniff test for me. I lived in Colorado for a short time in Colorado Springs, and what I saw, I mean, of course there are liberal people everywhere, but it's not Vermont. It's not the character of the people of Colorado.
No. Yeah. No, the people of Colorado are getting totally taken right now.
Mark, what are the implications? Let me ask you this. What are the implications of all this stuff that's coming out in Colorado with the fraud, Griswold and all that? But what are the implications for Tina Peters? It seems like she is being vindicated to a degree with all of this.
Absolutely, she should be. I mean, here's the deal on that. So what they claimed Tina did originally was that she made an image of the voting system, and they tried to take her down for taking the image because they didn't want anyone to dare have an opportunity to look inside what was going on in these black box systems. Then they realized that she was fully within her right to take a backup of her voting system, which is what she did. So they had to change their approach. And then because some idiot may have put out, it certainly was not me. I didn't even know Tina at the time. So anyone that would think I was involved, I was not involved in any of that. But allegedly, someone put out a screenshot of, not even a screenshot, it was a picture taken of what looked to be a laptop screen with an Excel spreadsheet in the background. And that Excel spreadsheet had BIOS passwords in it. And they claimed that someone took that picture and then put it out on the internet. Now, I've seen a picture that I think they're talking about, although it was not what they claimed it was in court, which is also a little bit odd. But I have seen one out there, and the BIOS passwords are partially redacted. So basically the first part of them, the first maybe third of them, is completely cut off. So you can't see what it is. You can only see the last part, which makes it completely innocuous at that point. If you don't have the first number of characters there, you're even through brute force, you're not getting into that BIOS. It's just, it would take forever, and you can't do it with software. So an automated type of system that would break into it, you'd have to use a piece, you'd have to sit there in front of it and type in, millions of different passwords, for years and years. It's just not realistic. So even that would not have put the system at risk. And that allegedly was only her county, only Mesa County BIOS passwords. So then what the state did is they said, okay, well, Tina has released these passwords through her actions, and that has put our entire election system at risk in all of Mesa County. And, they went nuts with it. So they then didn't have proofs that she did that, but they alleged that the person that she brought in to take the image used an ID badge of one of her contractors that she hired that was allowed to be in there. So instead of the contractor using the contractor's ID badge, they alleged that this other person that Tina brought in to do the image was using the wrong person's ID badge. And then they fabricated all these charges of, influencing, public officials and all this other garbage.
And criminal impersonation and all of that. Yeah.
All that garbage, right? It was around an ID badge. So if, picture you are, you're in Mesa County, you're the clerk, and you see something very strange happen to an election. Literally an entire conservative city council gets wiped out and goes liberal. And one of the candidates, representatives, tells you that they're going to win before you're even done counting the votes, and told you how many votes they're going to win by. And you haven't even finished scanning the ballots yet. And they were right. I mean, if you were a clerk, I would think that right there would make you very nauseous, that someone knew the results before you'd even put the ballots through the machine. And then you find out they wiped the whole city council off, and that one of the candidates just moved there 3 months ago. And none of the people even knew who these new city council members were. So, all that's happening. And then all of a sudden the Secretary of State and the voting system vendor want to come up and make an adjustment to the voting system right after we had this crazy, weird, potentially stolen 2020, which now we all know clearly 2020 was stolen. I mean, I knew it back then, but I think the rest of the country is really starting to wake up to it. So then a few months later, she has this municipal election. So she doesn't trust the Secretary of State at this point, and she has to protect her citizens. She took an oath to protect the vote of her citizens. So she did what she thought she needed to do, given the circumstances, is bring a third party in to make a backup of the system in a hurry, because her own county IT staff refused to do it. So she was in a little bit of an emergency situation. And she did it and took the image. So let's fast forward now. Now we find out a couple of weeks ago, Jenna Griswold, the Secretary of State of Colorado, which is the one that just chastised and went on the attack for Jenna, because if it wasn't for Tina, if it wasn't for Jenna, Tina would not be in prison right now. Jenna was used as the puppet in all of this. So we find out her office had released this whole password list, not just that little portion that someone took a picture of and somehow got on the internet and then redacted part of the passwords. They put out the full unredacted BIOS password list for every single county except one in the state of Colorado. And not only was it just out there by accident one time, they had it out on the county website for at least 4 months.
Mark, what are the implications of this for Gina Griswold? What should be the consequences, in your view, to her for this?
Yeah, so it's Jenna Griswold, Jena Griswold.
Jenna.
And yeah, so they claimed that Tina released passwords, which she didn't. She absolutely was not a person that put passwords out online. The only passwords that were there were partially covered up, so they were unusable. It was if someone did take that picture, they did what they should have done, is redact the important stuff, the sensitive stuff. And no one could have done anything with that anyway. And Tina had no part in that. She did not cause him to be out on the internet. On the other hand, Jenna Griswold put the full unredacted list out on the internet for the entire state. Tina got 9 years in prison. Tina is in jail right now. A 70-year-old Gold Star mom, the Navy SEAL's son that passed away in a parachute accident a few years ago. The state of Colorado, Jenna Griswold's office, and the other corrupt people in that state, including the prosecutor and the judge, are attempting to destroy this woman and put a 70-year-old wonderful American patriot in prison for 9 years at 70 years old. Jenna Griswold's office botched this about 1,000 times worse than anything they even claimed Tina did, which she didn't do. Secretary of State's office did do it, and they admitted it. And they're telling all of us it was just a partial password. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. We've secured the election system. In Mesa County, they made Mesa County buy a whole new voting system equipment. They spent a ton of money and had to buy all new equipment because they claimed they were irreconcilably compromised. When even if a BIOS password got out, all someone had to do was change the BIOS password again and then go re-image the system freshly again. Replay the image on the hard drive, essentially. But no, they wanted to punish Tina and make this much bigger than it needed to be. And so they made the county spend a whole bunch of money. So the voting system vendor loved it. They got to make more money from it, launder more money through that system. And now Jenna Griswold's like, oh, there's no problem. We're okay. We took care of it. We just went and changed all the passwords. But it's even worse than that, because Jenna Griswold, her office didn't go change the passwords. They waited a week. They knew about it. They waited a week, didn't even tell the county clerks. All these county clerks had no idea this had happened. Can you imagine the Secretary of State?
And this is during election. This is during the election, right?
After people had already been voting.
They were voting. This was while people were voting. They don't even tell the county clerks. So I've been letting county clerks know they're being lied to. A lot of them don't want to believe that. Some of them have realized they are. I'll tell you what, I think every county clerk in Colorado now, I hope, realizes you have all been fed a whole bunch of lies for years about a whole lot of stuff. And they're not alone. There are a lot of county clerks in other states, and I hope this is a wake-up call for them too. You're being lied to. You're being used. So I hope any clerk that wants to, feel free.
Mark, what about Griswold? What about Griswold herself? What happens to her for this?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen to her, what should happen to her. Let's see. Tina got 9 years for not even being a person that released passwords. And even if she did release those, which she did not, the passwords that were released out on the internet were covered up. They were partially covered up, so they're unusable anyway. So 9 years for that, and that was only one county worth. Jenna did 63 counties, full passwords. And then she lied about it continually on the news in her statements and interviews. So she should get at least 63 times 9 years, compounded with the perjury that she committed as well when people asked her about it. Not to mention the fact that she didn't notify her clerks for a week in the middle of an election. I mean, her actions are absolutely beyond egregious. She needs to be behind bars immediately. Tina Peters needs to be released immediately. And then everyone else connected with Jenna Griswold needs to be investigated, and other people need to be in prison as well. Because if you're going to put a 70-year-old woman in prison that was doing her job as a county clerk and claim she did something she didn't even do, the Secretary of State that made that claim absolutely violated 1,000 times. Her and every single person responsible in her office needs to be in prison immediately. And they were allowed to still sit there and conduct the Colorado election that clearly, I'm looking at the results right now. Boulder, 78.4 Kamala, 19.3 Trump. Denver, 58.8% Kamala, 18.2% Trump. A look at the county right below it. It's 22% Kamala and 76% Trump. Complete opposite.
So they just flipped them.
What I believe they're doing is I think they just flipped the two. I think that's what they've been doing in a lot. And I've been watching some results come in. Luckily, people have been taking screenshots of what they're seeing on their computers, on their phones, TV, and they're seeing votes go up and down and flip and just crazy things. Luckily, they're doing that. And I started electioncop.org. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but electioncop.org is an election night result monitoring system. It's a citizen oversight project. That's why it's called Election Cop, Citizen Oversight Project. And what we did just prior to the election is we started taking screenshots and forensic backups of websites all over the country that were reporting election results. So we don't just have to say, hey, I'm pretty sure that vote flipped last night, but I don't have any record of it. No, we are going to create a little Wayback Machine to be able to look back over time at all these results as they changed. And I'll bet we're going to have some good evidence in there that's going to point us where a lot of the manipulation was. So hats off to all the citizens that jumped on board in that last day and took part in this project. The reason I couldn't let anyone know about it up until the day before the election was because I wanted to catch them off guard. But I didn't want to do it right at election time because we needed time to set up. And I wanted everyone to know we're watching. So we'll see. Maybe it deterred some fraud, but I think the other we're going to catch.
Yeah.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Mark, are there any citizen-led initiatives in Colorado responding to this craziness about what Jenna did versus what happened to Tina, the persecution of Tina?
Yeah, a lot of people are trying to do something. The Libertarian Party, they filed a lawsuit, against Jenna Griswold. I advised them how they should have structured that lawsuit and break it into two pieces, add, a bunch of oversight to the Colorado election process as one, using the basis for what the Secretary of State's office did, which I think would have been a slam dunk to get guaranteed additional oversight, free access to records, immediate response times for any information requests, standard information automatically released so the citizens didn't have to ask for it. All that would have been a slam dunk, and I think even the governor would have had no choice but to agree and push massive transparency in Colorado elections. And then the second would be to, I would say additional auditing measures, because There's no way. What they did, unfortunately, is they demanded a hand count. They demanded throw all the machines out and go back to hand count. How do you do that in the middle of an election when people have already voted? How do you do it when clerks have
Right.
never even trained and have no clue how to even run a hand count? And it's not like you just do a hand count. You have to have planning to do it. Yeah, it takes time. It takes the tally sheets being designed. It takes training people. It takes having the personnel available. So it was totally unrealistic. And God bless the libertarians for being pissed about it. I'm glad they jumped in. But the structure of the lawsuit was certainly not ideal. And I told them all that's going to happen is you ask for too much, especially when some of it's totally irresponsible and unreasonable, and you're in the middle of an election, you're going to get the whole thing thrown out. Bad path. And they said, thanks for your input. We're going to do it anyway. And that was it. And then they did it. What do you know happened?
Was dismissed.
Gosh, I just, I have advised so many people over the years, and every time I'm ignored, the thing that I tell them is going to happen ends up happening. And I don't understand why people continually shoot themselves in the foot. Some of it may be on purpose because they wanted to get this precedent set and they want to cause these losses and failures on purpose. Some of them are just out of total arrogance and ignorance. And we are not going to win this fight if we are arrogant and ignorant going into it. We have to take input from the people, the experts that really know this and have been studying it for a long time. And if people don't start doing it, we're not going to be successful in this. We have a 4-year window, and it's not going to be easy going.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the Arizona stuff, the people that pushed the early voting, I think that's what killed Arizona. I think that's the majority of the manipulation. They were able to steal those big races with early voting. It was the stupidest thing ever to have all these people vote early and show our hand early, so they had plenty of time to prepare the counter ballots and all those counter moves. You don't win a battle by giving the enemy all your battle plans weeks before the battle. You surprise them at the last minute.
Yeah, that was my thought. That was always my gut instinct, was that if you vote early,
he's done. The get out the vote effort was massive. Everything else Charlie did, I absolutely love 1,000%. But pushing early voting caused a tremendous amount of harm to this election. And I wish there weren't blockers that blocked this information from getting to Charlie. And I wish when someone did finally get through to Charlie directly face to face, Charlie didn't call him a Fed and ignore what he had to tell him. Because I think if Charlie just listened, I think they would have had a much better strategy. Scott Pressler, I told straight to his face to face, a foot away from him, Scott, you cannot push this early voting. What you're registering voters, great. Don't push early voting. And he said, Mark, every expert has told me the same thing, and I don't care. I'm not stopping. And he walked off. And that was early, much earlier in the year. So it's not like I didn't have some success at telling some of these people this. They just didn't want to hear it. Now, I don't know if it's out of ignorance or if there's other reasons why. I don't know. I'm not gonna state that at this point. I'm sure when people do some research, we'll figure out the answers to all that. And then Laura Trump, she clearly just had horrible advisors around her, and there were infiltrators that gave her bad information. And of course, then it got up to President Trump, who, you notice he kind of knew it was wrong in his gut. He didn't just say, go vote early. His message was just vote early, vote on election day, just vote. And so he tried to, play it pretty fair. But when he added the word early in there, now people think, oh, we're supposed to vote early. And when they heard President Trump do it, a lot of people I've talked to that I've asked, why did you vote early? Or people that came to me said, well, I know I shouldn't vote early. I know in my gut it's wrong, but President Trump said early. So if President Trump says to vote early, then it has to be okay because he wouldn't lie to us. How quickly people forget that there are bad advisors, and there were bad advisors all around President Trump. Sabotaged him.
Well, yeah, and he benefited, and he was the victim of some bad advice throughout his first term, not just on issues like this, but on other issues. But hopefully, Mark, he has learned some things from the first term.
I hope he does. I really do, and I'm sure there are probably still a few bad actors around him. I pray that they are exposed. And I pray that God helps surround President Trump with the right people, with the honest people and people of integrity and abilities and expertise in all the areas that President Trump expects to be working together in order to repair all that's broken with our country right now, because it's quite a lot. It's going to take the right people, and we have a short window of time to do it. So I'm praying
Amen to
the right.
that.
And if someone never knocked on my door, I'd jump in a heartbeat and do everything I could. The sad thing about all this, and when he went to run in 2015, when he announced, I actually sent an email into the Trump organization in 15, and because I already knew how bad things were somewhat, and I sent an email in and I said, listen, I've got an established life and established business. I will close everything down, stop everything I'm doing, and jump fully on board, because I think you're going to need me in this fight. My email was never responded to, sadly, but maybe there's going to be another opportunity to make that offer come to fruition. I really hope so.
I wouldn't be
hope so.
surprised if there is.
And Mark,
Praying.
I agree with the day of voting, and I get your point, because you make it so succinctly. You've made it very clear why we need only day of in person, hand marked paper ballot, counted locally. That argument you've done a great job of making that very clear. My hope, at least, is that the early voting was a way to sabotage some of the day of plans that they had for places like Arizona and other places, because we saw so much of that kind of fraud happening. Georgia on the morning of election day, other places obviously as well. I think that I do wonder if your Plan Z, your talk of Plan Z, was thwarted in some ways, or at least the total damage of it was maybe averted in some places, not every place, because people voted early. And I don't think early voting is right as a rule, but I'm hoping that it was used as a tactic in the broader battle for this one.
I'd like to hope that too. I just don't think that's what happened here. Now, early voting was allowed. It's not like, these people created early voting. Early voting was already there. So there were already going to be people early voting.
Yeah.
But taking and shifting election day voters and scaring them into voting early did not help. I knew there's going to be a mix anyway. There were already going to be early voters that were going to expose it regardless. But why take a shift, massive amount of voters from election day over to early? Just gave an advantage to the enemy. And that's the problem I had. They didn't need to push early voting. All they had to do was push, get out and vote on election day. There's always going to be some people that are going to vote early because they just can't vote on election day, and they would have still exposed all this, or most of it. But then at least we would have
hit the
scale on the up. We would have surprised them with a massive amount of votes on election day, and there's no way they would have been able to deal with that. And I think all these other races we are fighting right now, I don't think we'd be fighting as hard. So I just think it was a miscalculation.
Maybe not.
Some people, I think, knew that if they push the early voting, that's the con, is get people to vote early. That's the easiest way to manipulate an election. And I'm sure there were operatives feeding that information in and trying to figure out how they convinced these big influencers to push early voting. And I'm sure a good job was done, on this. I don't think Charlie certainly didn't do it on purpose. He didn't do it to sabotage. I mean, clearly that man is a wonderful human being and a man of God. You can see it in everything he does. I think he had very careful manipulation perpetrated upon him that caused him to think that he had to do it this way. I think Charlie was played. I think it's possible Scott Presler was played. I know Laura Trump was played. There's no question she was. But either way, we are here. We got our foot in the door. Some mistakes were made, but we're here. So now,
and we have an opportunity now to correct a lot of things, to remedy a lot of things, and really to change our country fundamentally. And we have to seize it, as you said earlier in the show, Mark. There's no question about it. What's the best way, Mark? Can you remind the listeners what's the best way for people to follow you and support you?
Handcountroadshow.org It's Hand Count Roadshow, all one word, .org is my website. I do have a donate link on there. I hate being in a position to have to ask for help. I've never been that. I've always been independent. I don't take handouts. I never have. But I'm in a position right now that this 4 years I've blown through about everything I have. I don't know what my future is going to be, but I'm going to continue this fight because I know it's the right fight, and we have to for our kids and our grandkids and all our future generations. And for this country to survive, it's going to have to take some sacrifice. But I want to be able to stay in the fight long enough to keep fighting. So I need to stay viable. So yeah, if anyone can help me gain some viability in this, I will fight until I take my last breath.
Well, you're a true patriot, Mark Cook, and we look forward to seeing how things develop and visiting with you again soon. Godspeed, sir, and you're doing just tremendous work. And thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thank you guys very much. It's a group effort. What you guys have done is absolutely critical. We all bring our skills to this, and it's going to take every single one of us to be able to carry this home. So you guys, thank you for what you are doing, and you keep plowing forward because we need you too. Thank you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. We absolutely will. No stopping in sight.
Zero.
God bless.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.